Welcome to the course, Environmental Impact Assessment. So, as we are going on seeing EIA process, so we have already seen the first box where it's a preparatory and initial study stage. And then we have also looked at the second box where we talk about prediction of impacts, evaluation and assessments of significance of impacts, like how to see the significance of impacts. And then we had also looked into identification of mitigation measures. And today we're going to look at the right-hand side box, which you're seeing public consultation and participation, as well as the third box where we look at the review of the EIA and then the decision-making process. So we'll look at that today. So accordingly, our coverage would include that we will look at the conceptual understanding of public participation. We'll look at what are the legislative provisions for this, and different form of participation. What are the different types of participation? Then challenges of public participation, what kind of problems we face, and then the requirements of an effective participation and methods. What are the methods? We'll look into that. Then we'll look into EIA presentation, like what things one needs to take care of and what's important about this presentation. And then we'll look at how do one really reviews the EIA report or the assessment which has been done, and then how is the decision making process of any project, whether it will be approved or not. So that would be our coverage, and accordingly, the learning outcomes expected is that you should be able to define and review public participation. You should be able to understand what kind of public participation is happening, what is public participation by meaning itself, and what level we are able to achieve in any context. Then you should be able to identify key elements of EIA presentation, and then you should be able to discuss the process of EIA review, how the EIA review is undertaken, and then you should be able to discuss over the state of decision-making process on any project in the context of EIA. So looking at the conceptual understanding of public participation, if you are the team working on preparing the EIA report, then your main purpose is to provide information about environmental impacts of the proposed activity, what's going to happen. And you're going to provide these information to the developers, the one who is proposing the project, and then you would be also providing this information to the public, the people involved or will be affected by this particular project. So in a positive way or in a negative way, but they would be affected by this, so they need to know, and your job is to communicate with them. And then the legal consultants and all the consultants which will be involved, so your task would be to communicate with them. And also with the decision makers, like the officials who would be really reviewing it and making the final decisions, your job would be to communicate with them so that they can take a better decision based on what you have studied and how you're communicating it to all these range of people. And you do this so that the quality of assessment is improved. So why do we really communicate and communicate to the wide range of people? Because we want the information to be complete, we want the information to be useful, and how it becomes complete and useful, because when you communicate and you get feedback from range of people, then it ensures that you have taken care of various groups. You have taken the inputs and they had a role to play in the decision-making process. So it brings different people on board, and then it also brings in a lot of aspects which you might miss up, or the positive aspects it communicates to the larger group. So if you are the public person. So if you're not the EIA team person, but the public, you are the person getting affected by the project, you would like to know about the project, its environmental impact, and what if efforts are made to reduce it, and how any adverse impacts on you has been taken care of. So think how important the EIA information would be for you, and how important it will be for you to be constructively involved. So if you're getting impacted by it, it's important that you know about it. So think about how simplified it has to be, and it needs to address to your problems or your concerns that all need to be taken care of. Further, you also need to see how you present the information, and how that information will be used by different players and participants. So you need to be very careful about this. So how do you present the information, and how different group of players, participants are going to use that information, and how the final decision is taken. So there'll be a lot of dependency on how you present the information. So it can be decisive in terms of what decision is taken here. So how well the suggestions, inputs are incorporated in the final decisions, these are essential components in the EIA process. So any negativity, any non-engagements might lead to negative decision in favor of against the project. As you can see in the diagram, consultation and participation can be useful at most stages of EIA process. When you are shaping the scope of an EIA, because local people will be able to tell possible areas to look into. So they'll be very helpful to you to really identify what are their concerns and what areas it might affect, which you might not be able to find from your desktop study or a very limited exposure to the site. Further, you would also need to engage and have participation when you are providing site-specific information. People will be able to provide a lot of local knowledge and how the site behaves. So that all information you'll get from people. And then in the other stage also, when you are working out the alternatives, when you're looking at what is the possible location, what's the possible design, what's the possible source, and all these things as well, people can tell you about the alternatives which is feasible for all the parties involved. So when you are evaluating the significance of the likely impacts, also you can have participation, and it can add value to it. As you see, it is from the people, you would know what they value more and will affect them more. Further, when you are working out the mitigation measures, that time also participation is meaningful, because local community can tell you about the possible, feasible and acceptable measures for mitigating the impact. So they are the ones who are really going to let you know what is the acceptable and feasible for that particular context. And further, and we see that participation ensures sensible and meaningful objectives, and also completeness of the work. So when the participation happens, it ensures that whatever you have done, it makes sense and it is meaningful. It addresses to the objectives. It is complete work. It looks into all the important aspects. And further, it helps you in monitoring any conditions of the development agreement. So when your execution is going, construction is going, or it's in the functional state, then it helps you to monitor when people are involved in that. And then all the information, it's their right. The people have the right to know about it, and there should be transparency to the process. So it also makes the entire process very economical. So with the public participation, it might take you a little time and then little cost, but it's said to be very economical in the longer run, because it proceeds without any objection and delays. Because if people are on board with you, then there are less delays, less objections likely to happen. So there has been positive trend in engaging people, but public consultation varies a lot. from country to country and from developer to developer. So even though there's positive trend, you might be seeing that more and more people are aware and they are participating, they follow what's happening, and then it's happening on papers, but still it varies from country to what extent it's happening. There's a lot of variation in that. So it's seen that some do it as a requirement, that because they have to do it, they do it, and some of the proponents undertake extensive engagements to get better understanding of the people and the context. So it has been varying from project to project as well, and from country to country, context to context. So we see that public participation has been emphasized across the world, and you may also recollect the timeline we saw. So we talked about principle, like we talked about Rio Declaration. In that, particularly Principle 10 talks about the participation. And then you see Aarhus Convention, which again emphasizes the public participation. So looking at Principle 10 of 1992 Rio Declaration, it emerged from the UN Conference on Environment and Development, the Earth Summit, which we have seen. So it has three pivotal principles that inform the formulation of participation policy and regulation. So they have come up with three principles for the participation policy and regulation. And if you see, these principles are one needs to give access to information, then access to participation, and access to justice. So you see these principles here: access to information, access to participation, and access to justice. So looking at India, India's national EIA legislation was enacted in 1994. By the regulation passed in the Environmental Protection Acts of 1986, which we have already studied. So we see that further it was amended several times before we had major changes in 1997. In that, it made public hearing mandatory. So we have public hearing, which is mandatory in our case in Indian context. And this major amendment to EIA notification 1997 introduced public hearing. So you had public hearing as the part of the assessment procedure. So public hearing is part of EIA process for ensuring participation of local people and all the stakeholders in various proposed development activities. So it's mandatory. You may take care that it's mandatory, and this particular notification made public hearing mandatory. And if you look at EIA notification 2006, it defines the public consultation. So we do not use the term public participation, but we use the term public consultation, and then we'll also familiarize ourselves with those terms. So what does public consultation means here? Public consultation refers to the process by which concerns, whatever are the concerns of the local people, local affected people, so who are affected by the project. So you take the concerns of those and who have significant stake in the environmental impact of the project or because of the certain activity. So you take care of their concerns and view in the proposal. So you take care of it, how you take care in the environmental impact assessment. So that is what is called consultation, where you take care of their concerns and what kind of views they have. And according to EIA notification 2006, all category A and category B1 projects or activity shall undertake public consultation. So it's mandatory for category A and B1 to take. And EIA notification 2006 also provides the exception list, like what are the projects which will not need public consultation in the EIA process. So you can see the definition here, public consultation. You can also I've given you the link to download this notification, and then you also have the exception list. Now we'll move forwards. Now we'll look into different forms of participation. So we will look at like what are the advantages and disadvantages of public participation. And look here that we are using the term public participation. And we can also find a reader in this regard, which is given by ADB, which sets a guide for how EIA participation has to be taken place. So looking at what is public participation. Public participation, sometimes interchangeably used, but public consultation is a stage of EIA where the prime function, the main function, is to gather public's views and ideas. So how do you take their, you have to take their views and ideas about things. Their ideas are taken so that the project can be like tailor-made or adopted to accommodate their requirements and have minimum public opposition. So you don't really want opposition from people to delay your project. So you take their inputs and views so that they do not object in the later, and at the same time increase its chances of approval. So more and more people agree with it, you have a smooth, like fair chances of getting approval. So now looking at the different form of public participation, we'll look at Arnstein ladder of citizen participation. Many of you must be aware of this concept by Arnstein about how the citizen participation, what kind of forms are there. So through her concept, she identifies 8 rungs on a ladder of citizen participation, ranging from non-participation through tokenism to citizen power. So if you'll see the ladder here, so you will see the bottommost ladder is where the proponent of the project, it's like more of a manipulation. You're not really informing anything, you're not really taking their views and perspective and so on. Then there's another level which is like therapy, where you just take it for the namesake, or in the informing level you just inform people. In consultation you really take their input, and then you have where you go for you really take their inputs, and then you have another level where you have partnership, where you share the benefits, you share the problems, and you have an agreement. And then another level you see is the delegated power, where they also have equal power. The power is not just by with the person who is proposing the project, but also the people who they also have power, and then they can negotiate and discuss with you and then come to an agreement where they are not powerless, but they had certain level of power. And the extreme side is that it's completely under citizen control. So here you see how different there's ladder of citizen participation. So now you can think of public consultation. So you think where it would lie on here. So whether you're informing, whether you're taking their views, whether they are able to negotiate with you, whether they are part of the decision making or not, or they are just being asked for information. So you need to reflect when you really look at different different public participation context. So there's another similar concept given by Westman, who identifies 4 levels of increasing public power in participation methods. So it's like information feedback approaches, so where you just give information and you take feedback. So that's one approach. Another is you really consult them, you take their input. And there's 3rd level, which is joint planning. So you plan together, you come, and then it's everything is done together. And then other is delegated authority, where everyone has power to take care of. So you give power to the other, as to public as well. So if you look in very simple terms, participation refers to approaches that give more active role to public in influencing the plan, development, and approval. And whereas consultation refers to exercise involving passive audience. So you just take their feedback and then you note them down. So it's very passive, but when it's participation, it's said to be very active participation. So in consultation, you take public's view, but the respondent, whatever they view they are getting, they have really not much of control over what would happen. So they would just give their input there, but not really have control over the scenario. So active participation is suggested, however, depends on the project stage of EIA as well as on the participants. So it is suggested that one should engage, give platform for active participation for the public, but it will also depend on which stage of EIA you are in. So like if you're in the scoping stage, you can have much more active thing, but then when you're at the latest stage, when you have resolved most of the problem, then you can have different level where you can just take a consent and not really get into different debates. So now looking at the purpose of public participation in EIA, so we look at broad purpose where we say that one purpose is to obtain public input into decision taken elsewhere. So you take public participation, they are not really going to take the decision, somebody else is going to take the decision, but you take their input. And what kind of activities or the sub-purpose which are involved are like you provide information to public, like this is what the project is coming, and then you try to give them information, or you try to collect extra information which you might get from the people. Like in a project you might need like local context, local problems and all those issues, so they can fill information gaps. And then and also you can also testify the information which is being collected, so whether it's correct or not, so that that can also be taken care of. And then also how one can take care of the problem solving and how one can learn from each other. The other broad purpose which we see is shared decision making with the public. So you're just not making the decision alone, but you are sharing it with the public. So the specific purpose and activities what we see here is that it really makes the process democratic in principle, and then you see that you have number of people who get their ideas and things represented here. And then other form you see is the distribution of power and structure of decision making. So not only you have the power of decision making, but they also have the power of decision making. So in this you generally do is like involve marginalized groups and then the decision making is shifting now. It's not completely on you, but then the other person can also make a decision for the particular scenario. So the power shifts from the developer to the local people. So everything looks good about the public participation conceptually, but there are challenges to public participation. So what we see many a times, that's why probably there are a lot of different scenarios where people really hesitate to give that power, share their power, and then also not engage, because many a times participation can lead to inconclusive decisions, meaning that you might not be able to draw any conclusion because there are so many people and with different requirements that you're not really able to decide. And then every group might have different interests, different priorities, so that might also cause inconclusiveness in the decision. And then it is also possible that the decision may favor those loud and able to create pressure compared to actual people affected. So you have range of people, but then it is quite possible that the louder one, the people who are much more influential, the decision might favor them, but irrespective of who is getting affected more, maybe a poor marginalized person is getting affected more, but that person is not really heard and their concerns are not really penned down, and it has not influenced the decision, but the one who was loud and influential, those recordings have been made. So such kind of challenges are still there. And participation has also led to problems, like there has been delays, there has been activism, there have been conflicts, problems, and it has also stopped development. So you can see many of the cases mentioned here to see how public participation went otherwise. So it didn't really work well for the people, for the project, but it delayed the project, or many of the project got stopped. So in the watch list, I have given you a lot of links to see of the where public, because of public participation, the projects were stopped. So you can see that one case in California, another case in Japan, the Narita airport, the project was delayed because of the protest, and I think people died, and which caused delay in the project. So often by the developers, public participation is seen as the mean to create hurdle for the development of the project. So it can also be used for creating obstruction for any kind of project which is coming up. So now looking at the advantages and disadvantages of levels of different public participation, we see that one approach is information feedback. So you can do is like use film or PowerPoint presentation, television information kits, or you can use newspaper, or you can advertise, do the advertisement in the news conference, press conference material, website notice, all these. And if you see in such kind of thing where you are just putting it in the television, the news, you're telling that certain kind of project is happening, then how much power will the people will have? The people power here would be nil. And but then still the advantage of this is that there's a quick information. So information gets shared very quickly, and disadvantage is that no feedback happens on what you have been sharing. So other approach we see is the consultation, and here where you have public hearing, you do the briefing, you have representatives, you do conduct survey, you listen to them, you take interview, and you get the response sheets filled. So here also look at the extent of power you're giving in the decision making. So it's also very low. But if you look at the advantages, it allows two-way information transfer. So you are also letting them know about what you're doing, and you're also able to get their input on through the survey and interviews, like what are their concerns. And disadvantage, if we look at, it does not permit ongoing communication. It's just like one-time thing. And sometimes it can be also time consuming. Doing surveys and interviews can be very time consuming. So other approach you see is the joint planning. So where you have advisory committee, you have workshops, you undertake informal meetings, and then you have role playing, you have panels, and you also have interactive polling, and you undertake research. So if you look at the level of public power people have in decision making is moderate here, and advantage is that it permits continuing input and feedback. So when you do joint planning, so you get input for all the stages, and people also get educated, even you get educated in the process, and it allows larger engagement. But the disadvantage of this is that it's very time consuming, and then it also depends, like you are doing joint planning, but it depends on what information you have really provided to the local people. And then we see another approach, which is like delegated authority, where you take citizens review board. So you have citizen planning commissions, citizen juries there's a task force, and also there's mediation and negotiation. So here the power in decision making is very high of the public, and advantage is that it allows better access to relevant information, and it also allows greater control to decision making to the people. But the disadvantage for this is that it is long term, time commitment, difficult include wide representatives on a small board. So it's engaging all of that is difficult. So this was about the advantages and disadvantages of levels of different public participation methods. So now we'll look at what are the requirements and methods for effective participation. So you see United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, they provide 5 interrelated components of effective public participation. So you see that how you can really have effective public participation. So you have identification of groups, individual interested in or affected by the proposed developments. So identify the people who will be affected. So that's the first task. Then second, what we see is that you need to provide accurate information, plus you need to provide information which they can understand, and it's relevant to them, and it's given them on time. So that's very key to how do you really engage with people. So any information which is given later, or information which is not accurate, it's misleading, doesn't make sense, or information given which they cannot understand, the community cannot understand, also doesn't make sense. So for the third step, you see is the dialogue between those responsible for the decision and those affected by them. So there's need to be a communication established between the people who will be really affected. And then you need to assimilate all the information, what people say, and communicate for the decision making. And the fifth part you see is the feedback about the action taken. So you collect information and then you respond how you have taken care of that, how that has influenced what actions you're making now, what kind of decisions you're making now. So these are the 5 elements which we see. I'm just trying to understand public. What do we really mean by public here? It can be very large group, but what's in context of EIA, what do we mean here? Is that it's different interest group, and which would change over time and from project to project. And for the purpose of EIA, you classify them into 2 main groups. One is environmental interest groups, and the other is project affected people, PAP. So environmental interest groups, they are the voluntary groups, quasi-statutory bodies, or they are like issue-based groups who work for different dimensions of the environment, and they are concerned about these in a particular segment, or they can be concerned about the entire environmental issues. So they are the environmental interest groups. So they also formulate public. Then you have then you have project affected people. So people who live near a proposed development, who may be directly affected by it. So the people who are living nearby your project area, they are the people affected by the project. So you will find these 2 groups, and their interest would be different, because the environmental group might be interested about the environment, the local people might be concerned about smaller things, what's happening there, but make a huge difference in their life. And they might be also interested in getting the jobs in the project area which you're looking at, and it might also influence the resources, what they access to. So their nature of problems, all things might vary. So you need to understand these differences from these 2 group of people, and as a professional, as a EIA team member, you need to decide whom to take and not to take in your public participation team. And mostly what will happen, the first group, the environmental interest group, might be very vocal, might have resources to undertake it, like they might have a lot of money at the back end, and they might be loud, and they might be very aware of all the technical processes which are involved in EIA process and public participation. So their ideas can come across, but as a professional, it would be also your responsibility to reach out to the people, project affected people, who might not know about the legal technical aspects of it, and they might not be loud enough to communicate their problems and so on. So it will be the task of the people to the project EIA team to look into it. So often it is debated, mostly it is suggested that first group should be involved or not involved because they can influence the decision at the cost of the local people. So sometimes the strong group can really influence it at the as a project as a team. You might listen to the louder group more compared to the people who are actually being affected by the project. So we see that in EIA notification 2006 in the Indian context, it provides the public consultation process, and you can also look at Annexure 4, which gives the details of public consultation, how to undertake it. So it gives you like who are the people who have to be involved and what range you have to look into and how that has to be documented. So even one has to be very careful about what methods and tools you use to inform and take the feedback. So depending on how you're reaching out to people, how you're collecting information. So with local people, it is important that simple tools and techniques are used and local languages are used, and it's important that they should understand, they should be informed well. So it has to be very clear, information should be given, and honest communication should be made with the people. So here you can see that different methods of public participation and their effectiveness. So you can have explanatory meeting, you can have film and presentation, which it provides information, it gives it caters to the special interest group, and it allows two-way communication. And then you can have presentation to small groups, you can have public display exhibitions, you can have press release, you can have social media, written comments, you can do poll where you can do surveys, you can have field office, site visits, you can do advisory committee, work groups of key actors, you can have working groups, you can have citizen review board, you can do public inquiry, litigation, and demonstration, protest, and riots could also be seen as methods of engaging in the EIA process. So all these methods can be it's there, and what's the limitation and drawback, you can look at that. And then it's important to take feedback and how it has been incorporated in the complete project. So that was about the public participation. So now we'll move on to EIA presentation, like how important it is to communicate well. So EIA presentation varies from small presentation to very elaborate detailed presentation. And in India, EIA notification 2006 provides outline for EIA report submission. So how you have to provide, so you can see here the EIA structure, how you will have introduction, project description, description of environment, and all these things, and then how that information has to be provided. So for now, you will just see the outline of it, and then we'll try to see one example at the end of the course. We'll see how the report is written. So you see that introduction would take care of the purpose of the report and give the brief of the report, what's the scope of the study, and so on. And then you would also give project description, what's the project about. And then you would also describe the environment, the baseline study, and all the environmental figures would be given. And then you would be giving the anticipated environmental impact and what kind of mitigation measures have to be taken. And then alternatives, how you're looking at the alternatives, and you're looking at the alternative site and alternative technology. And then environmental monitoring program. So whatever impact is happening, how you're going to really monitor it. So you can have EMP as a separate document, or you can have it in the EIA itself. And further, you can have additional studies, you can also show the project benefits, and then you can also take environmental cost benefit analysis. Then you also prepare a EMP and then you provide summary and conclusion. And summary and conclusion become the key, very, very important aspect of the report. So it gives the overall justification for implementation of the project, and it explains how various effects have been taken care of. And you might note that many a times this would be the key element which will be read in your report. So it has to be really well written, and all the aspects should be communicated properly here. And then disclosure of the consultant engaged, who all have been there to develop this report. And looking at the contents and organization, EIA report should be very comprehensive and clear and should align with the legislation. So whatever legislation law of that context says, you should abide by that. And in India, EIA report would cover introduction, where it would indicate the purpose of the report and all the projects. So you can see here what kind of summary would come in the as per the EIA notification. And in India we have sectorial manuals, so that also gives you like guidelines on various content which one has to develop as per the content different sector. And the EIA report, the size of EIA report can vary a lot. So here you can see, I've just taken it from my desktop, you can see the number of annexures which you have along with this report. You see that that's such a lengthy EIA report, whereas you can see there's only one file here in another EIA report, the example created for you. So it might vary how intensive the report is, or how thick the report is, or how thin the report is. And another aspect is the presentation. So it's very important aspect of the report. It's very important that you make very clear report and people are able to understand what impacts are there, what kind of problems are happening without misleading. It has to be clear, and it will affect what kind of decisions are made, whether people reject it or accept it. So presentation can influence your decision there. And then you also need to add a lot of visual communication, because it helps for a better understanding. Like you can use maps, graphs, photo montages, diagrams, and other forms of visual communication. They really help a lot. So you can see example here, which I have taken from the same project, where you can see how it showing with the maps, locations, and all kind of corridors, and then also the all graphics indicating what kind of positive, negative impact would happen. And then you can see how the table is used for traffic reduction potential, what kind of strategies would make those reduction. So the other part which we see now, that's the presentation part. We're moving to the next part, now the review of EIA system, and we'll look at from the Indian context. So in Indian context, the appraisal, the review means detailed scrutiny. So in this particular stage, review. So in the review, detailed scrutiny, examination by the expert appraisal committee will be made. So it can be state level expert committee, or it can be the central level expert committee. So they would really scrutinize, examine your EIA report, and then they will look at your final EIA report, and then they will also look at the outcome of public consultation, what all information did you collect, and what happened in the public hearing proceedings. And they would ensure that it is done in a very transparent manner, and all the informations are provided to them. And based on this, the expert appraisal committee, or the state level expert committee, appraisal committee, will make categorical recommendations. So they will give it to the regulatory authority. It could be Ministry of Environment, or it could be the State Department. And for grant of prior environmental clearance on the kind of terms and condition, or they would suggest for rejection of the application before the environmental clearance. So based on that, expert appraisal committee would do that. And if there are insufficient information in the EIA report, then it is also risky for the expert committee to make decisions on that. So it's suggested that information should be provided clearly, and it's not good for the expert committee as well as the proponent. And if you see, in India, it is required by legislation to review EIA by competent authority. So the expert committee will review it. It is required by the legislation. And then based on that, so now moving on to the decision of whether to grant or rejection of the environmental clearance, it is the regulatory authority, the central or the state, shall consider the recommendation of this expert committee, and then they would communicate the decision to the applicant, whether it is accepted or rejected, accepted with certain terms and conditions. And this has to be communicated within 45 days of receipt of the recommendation by the expert appraisal committee. So that's all you can see in the 2006 regulation as well, how they work on it. So it's all procedure is prescribed in the appraisal. You can see how what all things have to be undertaken here. And then if you look at it, the validity of environmental clearance is meant for the period from the prior environmental clearance is granted, and if there are delays, they can presume the environmental clearance is granted. And the last part which we see here is EIA and public inquiries. So whatever proponent has prepared the reports with public consultation, and then it has been examined, and then the decision has been made and communicated, and then there is also provision for public inquiries. So people can really inquire about it, and they can inquire on the proposals and what kind of decisions has been taken. So in India, we have National Green Tribunal Act as well of 2010, which provides establishment of National Green Tribunal for the effective and fast clearance of legal cases related to environmental protection. So you can see that here. So that was the part of the last box and the public participation which we were looking at from the EIA process part. So we have covered EIA process. So winding up what we really did in this session. So we see that we worked on, we looked at the definitions of public participation. We looked at the legislative provisions which countries might have, and then different forms of participation, challenges, and then what are the effective methods of undertaking it. And then we looked at the key elements of EIA presentation, what one needs to take care of, and then what's the EIA review process from the Indian context. And we also saw the decision on process on the project. So that was the coverage for today, and this was the key reference. So we used our textbook, EIA textbook by Taravel and Woods, and then we also had EIA Training Resource Manual by UNAP. So these are the suggested watch and read if you're interested in looking at more of the cases, what I talked about, so you can look at that. And please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about any concerns you have. Do share your opinions, experiences, and suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you while exploring EIA. Thank you.